Hello everyone! Today is going to be a special episode because we are going to tackle our first major build in the form of a self-powering oxygen machine or SPOM. Now for this particular achievement run, we are going to build a submerged SPOM design, also known as a Hydra. I know it is a little bit of a hot topic amongst the community, whether infinite gas or liquid storage is considered an exploit. However, the beauty of this game is that problems can be solved in many different ways, and everybody can adhere to their own set of rules. I personally don't consider submerged SPOMs an exploit, and really like how they not only provide oxygen, but also help with early game power, whilst not conflicting with the super sustainable achievement. For those who already know how a Hydra works, let me know in the comments what you think about them. However, before we can get into any of this, we are going to have to access this cool salt slush geyser and build a liquid tank for it. Also, we are going to have to knock out a little bit more research. We've just started with the smart storage research because we need the automatic dispenser to finish our evolution chamber. And there's still a couple of items on the list that we need in order to make the submerged SPOM work. Now back to the liquid tank. At the moment we don't have insulated tiles yet. That's one of the things we have to research. So we're not going to be able to fully encase this yet. But making it a little bit broader already is going to be a good idea. Now let's also keep an eye on how much iron we have, because that's one of the materials we are going to need for the SPOM as well. 260 kilos. I think we'll do another, let's say 14 operations on that. And we also have to keep an eye on the fluxes, because since we have 7 of them in here, we can only have 1 egg lying around before they get cramped again. In terms of calories, at the moment we're pretty much sorted. Basically every time we run low on calories, we're gonna have a look at one of those BAMOS and convert them into barbecue. Now, we have to be a little bit careful because we don't want to hunt them to extinction, since they are very useful critter that we want to use later on for ranching purposes as well. Unfortunately, Pei is very much preoccupied with all of the research we still need. Otherwise, she could actually analyze this geyser for us. There's a saltwater geyser right next to it. Now the main difference between those is the saltwater geyser actually spits out saltwater at 95 degrees. So this is going to heat up some of the area. We definitely want to take care of this. Otherwise, the mercury anyway, but ice and brine ice, polluted ice, it's all going to melt. Now since the area is so cold, it's not an immediate problem, because the chill just overpowers the little bit of heat the saltwater geyser produces, but if we let this run for long enough, it's definitely going to melt everything else around it. Right, we just finished our smart storage. Next up we are going to go into pressure management. The airflow tiles are going to make it much easier for the carbon dioxide to escape down the bottom of our base. So as I mentioned, we have now access to the automatic dispenser. Now you don't need a mechatronics engineer for this to work. We're going to place it right here, and we're also going to remove the wiring because this building does not have to be powered. And I think it's going to be right on time because the reproduction rate of my fluxes is already increased since they are in a happy mood. We have to do this manually, at least until we have access to a mechatronics engineer and some auto sweepers. Now in preparation for our electrolyzer setup, we're also going to have to clear out the area a little bit. So the airflow tile research is done. We're going to go down here into improved ventilation because we're going to need an atmos sensor, and probably insulated gas pipes are a good idea as well. Now, since we have access to airflow tiles now, we are also going to spread them throughout the base in order to make the gas exchange a little bit more fluid, let's say. Duplicants are really struggling with the air at the moment. Now that the automatic dispenser is done, we are going to set this to sweep only, and Critter egg, Phlox fawn egg. Gonna give this a priority 7. Now you do want to set this to sweep only, because otherwise you're gonna create an infinite loop where duplicants drop off something and they can reach in here. They would drop the critter egg in there and then just pick it up again. So that's why this is so labor intensive. Now that the eggs are taken out, our Phloxes are groomed and happy, no longer cramped, and therefore their reproduction rate has increased as well again. Down here we're also going to open up a little bit more oxalite, because we definitely are going to need it. And since the sweeping command is going so well, we are also going to add another 2 storage bins for them to put all the loose material. And since we are now increasing the airflow throughout our base, it is also a good idea to move the polluted dirt and polluted water a little bit into the backside. And in order to do that effectively, we are just going to increase the bathroom to the size it's going to be later on. Since we do have a dupe with the Masterworks trait, I'm actually inclined to make this room big enough in order to fit some sculptures in there as well. Now, washrooms can have a room size of a maximum of 64 tiles, and that's going to be how large our washroom is going to be in the end as well. Then we are going to have 4 tiles for a water sieve later on. Probably another 2 tiles for a liquid tank. I think in this run I do want 2 liquid tanks. Then we are going to have 1 space for a deodorizer, 1 space for a storage bin, and then we'll probably need another 3 spaces for temporary polluted water storage. So that's going to be the size of the bathroom and its utility cabinet in the back. And as I mentioned before, this part right here is going to be where we store our polluted water for the time being. I think we'll actually dig down 2 more tiles in order to give that a little bit more leeway. So we're going to enlarge this area just slightly and put a storage bin on the bottom and a liquid bottle emptier up top. No research focus selected. We just got the Atmos sensor. That's great. We are going to need insulated tiles, so that's going to be next on the agenda. Actually, we do need a thermo sensor down the line as well, so we're going to go straight into that research. I swear to God, if you don't keep eyes on these guys, they are always going to get into trouble. Don't want to be sitting in there. Just going to clear this out and make sure they are on the right side. No, Steve. Stinky, you gotta have to wait a second as well. There you go. And some of the polluted dirt dropped out. It's not going to be an issue as long as no one picks it up again. Well, we can pick it up right now because this is where we will store polluted dirt at a 7. Whenever some polluted dirt pops up, my duplicants are just gonna go back in the back of here, drop it down here, then leave through the wash basins, which means they're not going to leave this area with germs on their hands. And right here we're gonna put polluted water at a 7 as well. Now the area is rather cold still, so most of the polluted water is probably going to freeze, but that's okay. If polluted oxygen is off-gassing, some of the food germs can be inside of those polluted oxygen pockets. However, duplicants can only contract a food poisoning illness if they eat something with food germs on them. It doesn't matter if they breathe them in. The food command has been issued. There we go, and we're back up to 30,000 calories. It's going to be a little bit more because we are going to convert it into barbecue. Another part of the research is done. Space heater, ice maker, icy fan, ice liquefier. We already had that one, but most importantly, insulated tile. Now I like to make my insulated tiles out of igneous rock because it's slow heating. So we're gonna come over here and probably put a ladder segment down there. We might actually be able to use this. We do need a little bit of hydrogen to start up our submerged SPOM, so we might access this part. Right, I don't think we have a gas storage yet. We are already researching the gas reservoir. Actually, it's fine. Probably will end up around the same time, so that's okay. We're gonna dig up this to make way for the gas storage. Now, we do want to set this up in a way so we only get the hydrogen out. There are ways of doing this, but I'm just gonna use the gas filter. This is going to be the line for hydrogen, and all the other gases is just going to get pushed out into the environment again. Now, it's not the end of the world if some of the hydrogen gas escapes in this particular instance, because it's just gonna float around to the side, and maybe at some point it will find its way all the way up here. It's not going to be a major problem for our base. Oh, and there's another geyser or vent. So as I mentioned, for the gas filter we're gonna set the filter output to unbreathable and hydrogen gas. We do need a decent amount of hydrogen to start off our SPOM. We have the gas reservoir now. We're gonna place one out of cinnabar ore right over here and connect it up to the hydrogen line. Also, we're gonna need new research. Now we are going to go into liquid tuning because of the radiant liquid pipes, and since this is a very cold map, we are also gonna be accessing the liquid tapidizer. I'll show you why later. Now at the moment we are not incubating anything. That means we are not actually replacing the fluxes inside of our ranch, so we have to be careful not to turn all the fluxes into meat. And later on, once we got the research for the SPOM out of the way, get an incubator set up quickly. And we already have some saltwater spillage over here. Now this is hot salt water, so we definitely want to get a move on here. Let's put priority 6 on these parts. Oh, we got some scalding. You might not want to stand right next to the scalding hot water, Steve. Oh my god, Steve is slowed down immensely. He's sopping wet. Has light wounds, that's why he has -2 athletics. Eye irritation and chilly surroundings. Come on, Steve, get out of this area. That's actually horrific. Okay, I think he regained some of his strength now. Still quite slow, though. And the next research is done. So next up we're gonna go into the desalinator, because we are going to need to convert the brine and maybe even some of the salt water into regular water for usage in the electrolyzer. Pei got another skill point. Now let's play it safe and give her applied science at the moment. And we also got a colony achievement off of that to pay the bills. For carnivore we have consumed 60,000 calories and we still have 79 cycles left. Locavore we only need 300,000 calories. Then we can start planting some plants. And super sustainable, well, we're not gonna worry about super sustainable for the time being. Yeah, the oxygen really is a problem. We do need to get a move on with our electrolyzer setup. Need to dig a little deeper in there. And since our oxygen situation is so desperate, what I'm going to do is plug all the holes over here. Same for the area up there. This way most of the oxygen that's coming from down there is going to stay in this area right here and is not gonna flow, well, all over the place. Now I have to admit it's rather greedy doing it this way. I just don't want to build 2 electrolyzer setups back to back. That's why I'm holding out for the proper one. You could just throw together a small electrolyzer setup and get some oxygen for the time being. However, I think we have enough time. I really do hope I didn't miscalculate on that. The desalinator is done. So the last part we still need, well, it's not really required for the setup to work, but the way I like to do it is add another ore gate and some automation in order to keep the infinite gas storage in check a little bit. Come on guys, we're almost done. And if I look at this, we're almost done for. As much as I would like to add additional dupes to the colony, we are on the verge of suffocating, so we're just gonna take the copper ore. Almost there. Perfect. So now we're actually getting some of the hydrogen and fill it into our hydrogen, or into our gas reservoir. We are also going to access the area down here because we are in desperate need of some more oxygen. If we are not quick enough with the electrolyzer setup, there's always the possibility to get some rust and use the rust deoxidizer as a bridge oxygen supply. Oh, yes. Oxygen. And I think it really helped that we closed off the area. So next up we are going to have to prepare for our electrolyzer setup. I have a build in mind, I just need to take a look at how we want to place it in this area right here. Alright, and this is going to become our first major build, which is the electrolyzer setup. I know it might look overwhelming at first, however, I'm gonna guide you through how we can set this whole contraption up step by step. It is going to be 19 tiles long and 16 tiles high. And we place it right next to our cool salt slush geyser for easy access of water. Now I've landed on this concept because it is going to provide enough oxygen for ultimately 12 dupes. Actually a little bit more than that. Now this electrolyzer setup will feature 3 electrolyzers. We'll have 3 hydrogen generators powering the whole thing. We are going to need a desalinator to convert brine or salt water into regular water. We are also going to have a tapidizer setup if the brine or salt water is too cold to be converted into regular water. And we are going to tag on an overflow of hydrogen that we will use as power for our base. This is basically the skeleton of the whole operation now, and I let my dupes finish this part before we can put in all the machinery. Our water sieve research just finished, so I guess the next interesting part is going to be finishing up incubation, because we are going to need incubators in order to keep our ranches filled. Okay, we got the incubation research done right now, and I think we're gonna stop the research for the time being so Pei can help out around the colony and continue later once the SPOM setup is done. However, with our new research done right now, we are going to place down 2 incubators in order to get our Phlox population stabilized. Now, Phlox eggs have an incubation rate of 5% per cycle, meaning it takes 20 cycles for 1 Phlox to hatch. Phloxes have a life expectancy of 100 cycles. That means during this time there's going to be 5 baby Phloxes hatching. So 1 unpowered incubator can replace 5 Phloxes in a ranch. That means with 2 we have more than enough, and we can even open a second ranch at some point. Okay, so with the incubators in place right now, we are going to set them up to incubate Phlox fawn eggs continuously, and we'll give that a priority 7, so duplicants come along very quickly, take out some of the Phlox fawn eggs and put them in the incubators. This way you ensure that you don't accidentally hunt your Phloxes, or any critters for that matter, to extinction, because there's always going to be a couple of backups sitting in your incubators. Now you can power those incubators and speed up the process of incubation. However, they take quite a lot of power early on, and we really don't have that kind of power to spare at the moment. Alright, so with the basic skeleton of our structure now in place, we are going to set down a couple of storage bins, probably up here is a good point. And we're going to sweep out the rest of the material that's still inside, because first of all, we don't want to leave any materials inside that we might want to use later on. And also there's going to be some ice and other meltable materials in there that might cause problems. So you generally, since we're not going to walk in here anymore, you generally just want to clean up everything before you start getting the machinery in. Pei got a skill point, and we're going to put her into improved carrying. Camille also got one, and it is always handy to have a plumber in the colony, so we're going to work towards that next. Alright, so we got most of the debris out of our building, which means we are going to fill it up with a couple of machines. And the first one is going to be the electrolyzer. We're gonna place down 3 right there. Then we are also going to place down 6 gas pumps. The part up here will also have 1 gas pump. By the way, you can make this out of cinnabar because we have brine as a coolant. So this whole area is not going to be very hot. Next up, we are going to need to worry about our power. Now we are going to need 4 power transformers in total. Then above, we are going to set up our hydrogen generators. And since this quartz right here is in the way and I don't really know how to deal with it yet, we are going to place down our batteries beneath it. Now luckily we still have enough refined metal, but we might have to grind up some more, and we are going to continue with the hydrogen generators. Now over here to the left we are going to place down our desalinator. Down here we'll set up a liquid tapidizer. We'll build it out of iron ore. Then up here we are going to continue with hydrogen generators. Ultimately, we'll place another one to the left here as well. So these 3 hydrogen generators are going to be there for powering the SPOM itself. And those 2 generators over here will be using the excess hydrogen in order to supply power to the base. Now, before we can set up those power transformers, got a little bit ahead of myself, we're going to want to place down a couple of bottle emptiers right there. Also down here, we are going to place down a liquid pump. We're gonna have to access that like so. Alright, next up we are going to have to build the gas pipes for our oxygen supply. We're just gonna let them leave through the bottom here. Up here, we're gonna move in with insulated tiles. This is going to be the water supply for the electrolyzers. And as a sort of self-cooling loop, we are going to spread out granite pipes from the incoming brine. Now ultimately we're going to add a couple more over on this side because there's going to be another electrolyzer, and it's going to come back around, pass through the desalinator to cool that down as well. And then we're going to have it pass through here. The brine is coming in at minus 20 degrees almost. Well, it's coming out of the geyser at minus 10. But since the surrounding area is still colder, the brine has minus 20 degrees. It's going to come in here, cool down all of our machines, and find its way down there. Now if we connect it directly to the desalinator, even if it heats up by 10 degrees, it's still going to be minus 10, which means once it's converted to water, it will instantly freeze and crack your pipes. Now in order to prevent that, we are going to add a little bit of a loop through a tapidizer setup to warm up the remaining brine in order to ensure that the outcoming water right here is not going to crack the pipes. And this is going straight into the electrolyzer. So in the end, we are going to end up with a self-powered, self-cooling oxygen and power contraption that is going to be very valuable to the base. And I think I'm finally gonna give in and we're gonna build a rusty oxidizer because the margin is very tight and there's only a limited amount of oxygen left. So this is going to take just slightly too long. Instead, we're gonna go down here and open up an avenue to get some rust. Now where to put it? With the rusty oxidizer you have to keep in mind that it produces chlorine gas. It doesn't produce a large amount, but it is noticeable if you have it running for a longer period of time. So we're going to deconstruct that, get our rusty oxidizer, put it on that tile right there. We are also going to add an airflow tile so the chlorine gas can drop to the bottom. And then we are going to add it into our power grid. Oh, we actually got a nosh beam. Sometimes in these biomes, in these rust biomes, you can get Dasha salt vines, and those actually consume chlorine, but we're not going to worry about that. One rusty oxidizer is also going to require some salt. We do have some salt lying around already, so that's not going to be a problem. And it's going to reduce 570 grams per second of oxygen. That is going to be almost enough for all 6 of our dupes because they breathe in 600 grams combined. Along comes the salt. And oxygen production has commenced. Now there's going to be the odd chlorine bubble Chlorine is heavier than oxygen, so it eventually will end up at the bottom of our base, above the line of carbon dioxide. Now, once the pipes are all in place, we can also worry about wiring up some of these machines together. Combine 3 of those pumps for a total of 720 watts. Then we are gonna go up through here and we'll have a nice 840 watts on this line. And we're gonna do the same for this lane right here. Then we have one odd one sticking out. This is going to get combined with the water pump down here. So this is gonna come up here through there. And then we're gonna have to hop across right there. Couple of wire bridges. And last but not least, we're going to have one power transformer that is only hooked up to our liquid tapidizer right there. Now, since we do want another hydrogen generator over on this side, we're going to extend this a little bit. You have to keep in mind that my duplicants need to have access to the top side there as well, so we're going to put down a couple of ladder tiles. I just realized that we completely forgot about that saltwater geyser, and it starts spilling over again, so we definitely want to get on that as soon as possible. Otherwise, we're going to have a giant mess in our base, and I really would not want that. I'm going to open this up just to have a couple more tiles until this completely ruins our day. This is very dangerous because, as you can see, there's some brine ice lying over here. As soon as this spills over and heats up the area, it's gotta be a huge mess. I mean, we do have a liquid tank right here, but it can very easily spill over into your base, so you have to be quite careful when tackling these areas. Alright, so with those materials out of the way, we can place down another hydrogen generator and complete the brine loop. Camille, what do you have in your hand right there? Might that be some bleach stone? This always catches you off guard at least once in a playthrough. If you have your storage bin set to hold an item, and it's the only item in that category, and another item in the same category gets added because, well, we've just uncovered bleach stone, it automatically gets ticked as well. So what my dupes are doing is they're carrying the bleach stone that I didn't want in my base from over here inside my base. That's unlucky, but sometimes that just happens. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna place down a storage bin, let's say here, and we're gonna move all the bleach stone they just carried inside the base back out again. Alright, now with the pipes almost done, I think it's a good time to put in some automation next. We do want an Atmos sensor on the bottom half and an Atmos sensor on the top half of the build. Position doesn't really matter, I'm just gonna put it all the way to the left. Then we're gonna set up an automation bridge right there. Then we're gonna put down an OR gate facing to the right and hook it up to the electrolyzers. Because the basic plan is going to be that the oxygen will be at the bottom of the build and the hydrogen will be at the top of the build. And I want to limit the gas storage, since it's infinite technically. I want to limit it to either 20 tons of hydrogen at the top or 20 tons of oxygen at the bottom. In the beginning we're gonna be using a lot of hydrogen and not as much oxygen, so there will be an oxygen buildup, but this allows me to control how much of either material we are going to produce. Also over here we are going to need a thermosensor for our liquid tapidizer. Another piece of automation we are going to need is going to be the batteries and the hydrogen generators on the top, because these are going to only be active if the batteries run out of juice. And now that the middle part of the build is finished, we can finally start closing it off. Get this half of the build done first, because I don't think it's reachable from the top. Alright, with the middle part of our build almost done, the wires are in place, the pipes are in place, and the automation is in place, we can now get to the submerged part of the submerged SPOM. That's why these bottle emptiers are right there. Now, in order for this to work, we are gonna need 2 different liquids. Since it's still very cold on this map, I'd like to take 2 liquids that definitely won't freeze in this temperature. One of them is going to be ethanol. So we're going to set a pitcher pump up into this pool right here. And the other one might not be very apparent, because while we could take brine, polluted water, salt water, or regular water, it is very likely that these will freeze in temperatures of minus 27.1 degrees. However, there is another liquid, and it is down here. In the teleporter area, there's always going to be a puddle of crude oil. And this is just enough crude oil for us to build our submerged SPOM with. So we're gonna access this real quick, mop it up, and then we are ready to submerge our SPOM. Similarly, we are also going to prepare the liquid tapidizer. For this, we're gonna close it up right here. Remove the desalinator temporarily. And up here, remove this insulated tile. Alright, with this in place, we are going to start with the crude oil. We'll set this to sweep only, crude oil. Then we're going to go down here. There's a pocket with 80 kilos right there. I think in total it's going to be 100 kilos of crude oil. We're just going to take this because that's more than enough. And we'll set this to sweep. A lot of people have different numbers for how much liquid they want to put in these areas. I personally try to aim for around 10 kilos per liquid. Because then you have 5 kilo pockets and you're definitely safe that the electrolyzer will not be flooded. And here comes the crude oil. You do want to keep a close eye on them because you don't accidentally want to flood your electrolyzer. So we're going to set this to normal speed. We have 80 kilos in there right now, so we're going to stop at around 70. That's good enough. And we're going to uncheck crude oil and it will immediately stop. And now, down here in the liquid tab, we have almost, well, if we let it equalize, we will have around 5 kilos of crude oil. Now we're going to do the same over on this side. Sweep only, priority 7, and sweep. Camille comes around again. Be careful. 69.8 kilos. 58.5, that's fine. Uncheck. Crude oil, sweep only, priority 7. Sweep. And we can also retoggle Camille, then this is going to be the first command she's going to do again. $58.5. 48.5 right on the dot. Perfect. So now we have our first layer of liquid. Didn't quite equalize on that side. But it's gonna be fine. Next up, we've placed a pitcher pump in some ethanol. So that's the next one we are going to take. We're gonna put this to ethanol. Enable auto bottle. I think we have to remove sweep only, I'm not entirely certain. Here comes the ethanol. Now for this one, since Mima has additional carrying capacity, gonna be left with 200 kilos of ethanol. The same principle applies, so we want to stop at around 190. There you go, that's excellent. Uncheck the box again. Right here we go to sweep only, ethanol, and sweep. And if we look at the liquid overlay right now, the two liquids will not mix. But we have crude oil at the bottom and ethanol at the top. So now we have a submerged electrolyzer. And what is going to happen later, once the electrolyzer produces its products, namely oxygen and hydrogen, the oxygen will get pushed out to the left and flow to the lower part, and the hydrogen will get pushed out to the top and flow to the top part. And since this is done submerged, it doesn't check for pressure, and theoretically you have an infinite gas storage in both of these areas. Okay, 190 kilos of ethanol, 180, sweep only, ethanol, sweep. Worked out perfectly here as well. And for the last round, ethanol at the top, crude oil at the bottom. Okay, with that out of the way, we can deconstruct the bottle emptiers and finish up the build. We're gonna put down a couple of airflow tiles right there. Gas pump that will pump out our hydrogen. Then we're gonna need a couple of transformers. And connect everything with heavy watt wire. So this is going to produce our power for the SPOM. All the individual power lines that can't exceed 1000 watts on the front of your transformer. We'll hook these up. And in order to check if we did everything right, we can see this wire has a potential load of 840, 840, 360 at the moment, but there's gonna be another added 480 with the desalinator. And right here we have 960. So all the transformers are correctly set up. Now we're also going to need a gas vent, because later on, once we've vacuumed out this room, we're gonna have to fill it back up with hydrogen. That's why we've prepared this gas reservoir over here. And the last thing that's remaining is building out the gas pipe for our hydrogen line. We're gonna lead this gas pipe up top. Then we are going to add a gas bridge, although we are not bridging over anything. However, the gas bridge is going to create a priority system for us. So the gas will always try to go through the gas bridge first. We'll lead it over. Actually, we'll give it a little bit more leeway so there is a little bit of backflow in the pipe. And around. This is going to be the priority queue for all the hydrogen that gets sucked out of this area. It will come in here to our hydrogen generators that power the SPOM. And once there is backflow, we're gonna lead it back and to the hydrogen generators that will provide power for our base. So to recap, the hydrogen will fill in this room, the pump will suck it in, it will come to this tile, it will take the priority gas bridge, it will flow in here and will be used by the hydrogen generators. If there's enough power in the batteries, it will backflow. At some point there's enough hydrogen in these pipes that it will get diverted over here. And right here we'll have a similar setup with batteries. If this backs up, the pump will just not function anymore. At some point there will be 20 tons of gas pressure in here, at which point this atmos sensor, once we've set it up, will tell these electrolyzers to stop working. If there's 20 tons of gas pressure in the oxygen chamber as well, the pore gate will shut off, give a red input like it does now, and the whole system right here will halt. And only if we use up too much oxygen or need the hydrogen for power, it will spring into action again. That's an interesting one. Previously I skipped past a couple of the new printables that were available, since we were not taking any dupes anyway. It was mostly sand, iron, that kind of stuff. But pip eggs are very cool. We're gonna leave them in there for the time being. There's not much havoc they can cause. And with the plumbing in place now, we are going to put down the manual generators right here. Add some heavy watt wire. Also, we want to add the gas pipe for the upcoming hydrogen. Actually, we are gonna cut it right here and cut it there, because we have to create a vacuum here first. So none of these machines are going to turn on, other than the liquid pump. And we've already set up the liquid pump to just pour the liquid through here and inside of the liquid tapidizer tank. And we have some cool brine coming in now. Since we've prepared this area here correctly already, we're going to finish this part up and close it off right here. So this is going to be a closed-off chamber, and this is going to be a closed-off chamber. And as you can see, the idea behind the build, these cool pockets of brine are going to cool all these buildings in here. Then the brine is going to get heated up, if it's still necessary, and will get converted to water. And since we don't want any brine remaining in those liquid pipes for the time being, we're going to go ahead and cut this off. And now we have a nice container of liquid that we'll use to heat up the brine if necessary. Alright, with the gas reservoir in place, we can now start vacuuming out this area. We do have to keep in mind that a vacuum would be bad for our power transformers, But luckily we got some hydrogen already queued up. Once this is completely vacuumed out, we're gonna fill it back up with hydrogen. Down here the last bit of the pipe has cleared out as well, so we are going to close that up and then reinstate the desalinator. And since we're only moments away from actually turning this thing on, we are going to have to prepare a gas pipeline to pull the oxygen into our base. Now in the beginning I'm only gonna use 2 lanes. Well, actually 1 lane would be enough for my duplicants to survive at the moment. But I also like to use the second one to pressurize the area outside of my base a little bit. And we've achieved a vacuum in here. What we're going to do is fill this area back up with hydrogen. So this is what later is going to happen as well. The hydrogen gas will be at the top and the oxygen will be at the bottom. On this tile of the electrolyzer, the gas is created. So it gets pushed out to the left and pushed out to the top. And you want to put in hydrogen and oxygen preemptively in order for the gas to get pushed into the correct tiles. Otherwise, what can happen is oxygen will get pushed up to the top tile and you'll end up with a huge mess. So once those gas pipes are completed and we have the desalinator back in place, we can turn this baby on. I've accidentally left those gas pipes on. We definitely don't want that to happen. So what we're going to do is disconnect the power from these really quickly. Otherwise we'll create a vacuum in here and that is going to cause problems. So all that's left to do before we can turn on the whole SPOM is going to be replacing the desalinator. Actually, I have to be careful not to have those connected accidentally. Then we are also going to put down a couple more insulated tiles. That's just for looks. And we are also going to have to prime this liquid tank, because at the moment the brine is sitting at minus 20 degrees and we probably want, yeah, let's do 7 for the time being. We can, because at the moment we have to manually charge this thing and it is a power hog. This thing requires 960 watts, so it's gonna suck the juice out of those batteries instantly. Alright, the brine is now sitting at a nice 7 degrees and we can start pumping in the brine from our pool over here and start the whole process. So the brine will come in from this tank at minus 20 degrees. Later on, it might only have minus 10, but that's still fine. It's gonna loop throughout this whole building. Even without radiant pipes, it is going to cool down these buildings. So not only is this machine self-powered, but it is also self-cooling due to this nice cool salt slush geyser. I was rather surprised that the temperature exchange doesn't happen at all, and I completely forgot to replace these tiles with radiant liquid pipes. That's basically the only part in the build where you need radiant liquid pipes, because as you can see, instantly we get some cold damage. Another thing we should do is replace these granite tiles with actually insulated liquid pipes, because that's going to help keep the heat inside of there for a little while longer. Before we close this off, actually, we are going to add another row of radiant liquid pipes, because later on we are going to use this liquid tapidizer to also heat up part of our base. Alright, hang on a second. Before we continue with this, I do want to set the thermal sensor to if below 20 degrees, because I think while this is now 7 degrees hot, I think it's too short of a time span, these 4 tiles, before the minus 20 degree brine passes, and we're still gonna have some breakage. I mean, those couple of pockets will break anyway. There's not much we can do about it. Later on, we're not going to need as much power anymore, because this area is going to heat up eventually, and this brine eventually will not be as cold anymore either. Perfect. We've reached 20 degrees in here, and obviously the temperature is going to equalize rather swiftly. So what we're going to do next is hook this back up. Let's see how we're looking over here. Okay, it's coming in at -2. -2, however, is still fine, I think. It's definitely cutting it close again. Once we have some backlog, this is going to be fine. Good, so To recap a little bit, we made sure there's only hydrogen gas up there. We got about 800 grams per tile. That should be enough. And there's very little oxygen down here, but this should be enough. So the oxygen separates into this tile and the hydrogen separates into this tile. That means all that's left to do now is set up these Atmos sensors correctly. This way we assure that there's always going to be enough gas inside of here without actually infinitely storing the gas. Now in the beginning there's going to be more oxygen than hydrogen because we are actually using up a lot of the hydrogen, and this will probably go up to 100 tons per tile or something like this. With 6 gas pumps, each capable to move 500 grams of gas, we actually have the capacity to drain this area. So there is always going to be some sort of failsafe in there. This is going to be the moment. And there we go. Now, as you can see, the hydrogen is moving to the top and the pressure per tile is steadily rising, and same is true for the oxygen. So our infinite gas storage, or Hydra, is now successfully online. Now, another thing we want to keep in mind, we do want to let this run for a little bit with the power of our manual labor over here. Because it very easily can happen that you suck out too much hydrogen, causing a vacuum, and then the system will break. So you do want to at least store a decent amount of gas per tile before you actually take anything out of it. This is basically just a startup problem. If you want to prevent this, you can simply add another Atmos sensor up here and tell the pump to stop if the gas pressure drops below, let's say 500 grams or 1 kilo or whatever. This way you would actually build in another failsafe. Also, one thing I've noticed, this wire right here, unfortunately, has 80 watts too much on its line, which means we are actually going to remove the pump from this equation and just put it back into our power grid. Eventually we are using the hydrogen from this machine to power the rest from our base, so I guess you can make up your own mind. Is it a SPOM? Is it not? I think it is, and we are going to go ahead anyway and connect up the pump with our main grid over to the left. And we do want to make sure not to accidentally overcharge. So this now works perfectly. Can remove this. And now the wire is not getting overloaded anymore. Down here we're already sitting at 15 kilograms per tile of oxygen. Up here we're sitting at about 3 kilograms. The brine is coming in at the moment at minus 20 degrees and leaving at minus 1.5. This is actually cutting it a little bit close. I think we're going to increase the temperature in here up to 25 just to be absolutely sure that there's always going to be a water supply. A liquid tapidizer just takes way too much power. So if only one duplicate is on the wheel, it's actually not going to be enough to power this liquid tapidizer and the desalinator to boot. I think we can risk activating the hydrogen generators up here. And all we need to do for that is reconnect these pipes. And we're gonna have to keep a close eye on the amount of gas that's still inside of here. Alright, it looks as though we actually can continuously run this. As you can see, the gas pressure is still rising, although we are using the hydrogen already. We've now achieved a little bit of a backup already as well. Oh, we didn't set the batteries. Okay, that's the problem. We're gonna set the batteries to 95 and let's say 65. Now, once the charge drops below 65%, the battery's gonna send a green signal activating the hydrogen generators, and it's going to tell them to stop at 95% charge. The reason you don't set this to 100% is the hydrogen generator will finish its animation, and sometimes it will waste hydrogen in the process. So if you set this to 95, the last 5% are basically to catch the finishing animation of the hydrogen generator, as though not to waste any materials. I'm gonna take this and copy it over, thus activating the hydrogen generators again. And as you can see, down here the Atmos sensor now registers that we already have 32 kilos of pressure in here. Therefore it's sending a red signal, but up here we are still below 20 kilos and the electrolyzers are still online. The base is not looking great in terms of breathability. That's why it is finally time to unleash the oxygen into our base. And we now slowly but surely fill the base with oxygen. And I think that will do it for this episode. So I hope it wasn't too convoluted and you could follow those steps. In the next episode, we are probably going to expand our base a little bit. Then we are also going to activate our hydrogen generators and use the excess hydrogen in order to power our base. So thank you so much for watching, and until the next one.